The day the stagecoach rolled into the station, the air was so hot it felt like my lungs were filled with smoke. I remember the way the boards of the platform burned beneath my boots as I shifted my weight, clutching that single letter in my hand like it was the only thing tethering me to hope. I had read Phoebe Langston's words so many times that winter, her neat script telling me of soft bread she baked, of winters in Germany, of the smile she swore she would bring across the ocean to me. I had memorized her photograph, blonde hair braided neatly, eyes the color of a clear sky, lips curved in a promise that had kept me warm through nights colder than I care to admit. So when that coach door opened and I saw the wrong woman step out, the world tilted. She wasn't Phoebe. Not even close. Her hair was dark, pulled tight from her face, her eyes sharp and almond-shaped, and the clothes she wore were nothing like a bride would ever wear. No ribbons, no light colors, just plain fabric worn thin by miles of dust. She carried no bouquet, no gift, only a wooden box clutched so tight against her chest it was as if letting go of it would kill her. The driver muttered something about mixed-up papers, tossed down her single bag, and rolled away without looking back. Just like that, the stagecoach disappeared into the horizon, leaving her there, standing still as stone, searching the station with her eyes until they locked onto me. I should have felt anger, disappointment, confusion, and I did, but over all that was the strangest thing of all. She looked at me like she had been expecting me, and that's where everything began to go wrong. I stepped closer, the letter trembling slightly in my hand. My heart thumped against my ribs, not from the heat, but from the impossible reality standing before me. She lifted a piece of paper, held high like it was a shield, and pointed to something written in intricate characters, strange shapes that meant nothing to me. The sound of her voice was unlike anything I had heard before, syllables sharp and precise, urgent even, as if she were begging the wind itself to carry her message. I tried to speak, but my voice sounded hoarse and foreign, even to me. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake," I said. She didn't flinch. Instead, she glanced at my letter, then at her own paper, her dark eyes narrowing with concentration. I realized then that she wasn't confused. She was calculating, weighing every possibility, every choice. And that's when I noticed it. The sleeve of her coat was torn, dark and wet in the shadowed fabric, a mark of pain she hadn't fully revealed. My gut twisted, warning me something more than a misdelivered letter was at play here. Samuel Crow, always the first to sense trouble, emerged from his store, squinting at her as if she were a stranger from another world. He muttered a question about the German bride, his voice low but sharp. I shook my head. This woman wasn't Phoebe, but the look in her eyes, intelligent, wary, dangerous, told me that whatever had brought her here, it wasn't by accident. The wooden box pressed to her chest seemed heavier than its size, as if it carried not just gold, but a responsibility she could not afford to drop. The heat of the afternoon pressed down on the platform, but my attention had shifted entirely to her. Every step she took was measured, careful, as if the slightest misstep could bring the world crashing down. Her fingers clutched that wooden box with white-knuckled determination, the kind of grip born from a lifetime of guarding something precious. The torn sleeve of her coat drew my eyes again, the dark stain spreading like a warning. She wasn't just tired or weary from travel. She was hurt. And judging from the way her body tensed with each movement, the injury had been inflicted deliberately. I glanced around the empty station. Nothing stretched for miles but the barren land, the heat-hazed horizon, and the dry wind that kicked up dust in swirling eddies. This wasn't a place for mistakes, not with her condition and the secrets she carried. Samuel, gruff as ever, muttered something about calling Doc Miller, but the woman's eyes widened with alarm the instant he mentioned it. She pressed the box tighter, her entire posture screaming caution, and backed toward the edge of the platform like she might flee into the desert. But the open expanse offered nowhere to hide. I realized then that I had a choice. Turn away, let the confusion resolve itself, or stepped closer and assumed the role of protector, even if I barely understood what I was protecting her from. Heat rolled off the boards in waves as I took that step forward, and in that moment, I understood why some people survived by cunning, and some by courage. She had the courage of a woman who had already faced the worst the world could throw at her, and I was about to step into it. The sound of hooves on the dry dirt road made my heart skip. I hadn't heard another stagecoach approaching, and yet the rhythm of fast-moving horses announced that trouble wasn't far off. I turned to see 3 riders emerging from the heat haze, their dust-covered faces unreadable, but their posture unmistakably aggressive. The lead rider carried a glinting badge on his chest, but there was nothing righteous in the way he rode. His eyes burned with a purpose that made my stomach tighten. The woman froze beside me, her dark gaze locking on the approaching group, and the grip on her wooden box tightened until I could see her knuckles whiten. Something about the scene felt rehearsed, like a trap waiting to spring. The rider in front, the sheriff by the glint of his badge, called out, his voice carrying across the platform, accusatory and cold. They were looking for a Chinese woman, traveling alone, suspected of carrying stolen property. My pulse hammered against my chest. Stolen property? From what? And why did they seem to know exactly who she was, even though she had just stepped off the wrong stagecoach? I instinctively moved to place myself between her and the sheriff, realizing that this wasn't a simple misunderstanding anymore. The torn sleeve, the dark stain on her coat, the box she guarded as if it were her life itself, it all fit together in a dangerous pattern. Whoever these men were, they weren't coming for questions. They wanted the box, and judging from the way the sheriff's eyes lingered on her, he didn't care if anyone else got hurt along the way. The desert heat pressed down, but the cold edge of fear ran along my spine, warning me that the next minutes would decide more than just who survived. They would determine what kind of world she would live to see. The woman's hands shook slightly as she pressed the wooden box closer, but it wasn't fear alone. It was calculation. I could see it in the way her dark eyes flicked from the sheriff to the horizon, measuring distance, weighing escape routes, assessing possibilities. My mind raced, trying to anticipate what was coming. If these men thought they could take her box by force, they hadn't counted on the intelligence and speed she clearly possessed. That box wasn't just valuable. It was critical. Something about the weight of it, the way she guarded it with every ounce of herself, screamed importance beyond gold or simple possessions. The sheriff and his deputies dismounted, dust rising in choking clouds around their boots. They moved like predators, closing the gap with casual authority, guns loose but hands ready. My instincts screamed at me to act, to shield her, to make a stand right there on the platform where the boards creaked under the weight of tension. I caught a glimpse of the dark stains on her coat again and the torn sleeve, and I understood that this was more than a robbery or a misunderstanding. Someone had already tried to harm her, and the marks were fresh. Whoever she was, whoever had sent her on this stagecoach, she had enemies willing to leave blood in their wake. I took a careful step forward, raising my hands in a gesture I hoped would appear non-threatening yet firm. Every second stretched endlessly as the woman's gaze met mine, silently asking if she could trust me. And in that instant, I made my choice. Nothing mattered more than keeping her safe, understanding that this wooden box held the key not just to her safety, but to a future she might never have if we failed. The sheriff's eyes flicked between us, growing impatient, underestimating the quiet fire burning in both of us. Whatever this box contained, I knew now it was the center of a storm far larger than either of us, and stepping between her and those men would be the first step into chaos. The sheriff's hand drifted toward his gun, a slow, deliberate motion that set every nerve in my body on edge. I stepped closer, positioning myself between him and the woman, my eyes locked on the tiny wooden box pressed against her chest. She followed my movement, shifting behind me just slightly, as if instinctively recognizing that I would take the first hit if it came. My pulse pounded in my ears, loud enough to drown out the creaking of the stagecoach boards and the distant clop of hooves still fading down the dirt road. The deputies spread out, guns loosely aimed but ready, their stance confident only because they underestimated us. The woman's dark eyes darted to them, sharp, calculating, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of trust, or maybe relief, directed at me. She spoke rapidly in her language, words I couldn't understand, but the tone was clear. Urgency, warning, a plea for caution. I understood well enough. Whoever she was, this was bigger than a simple theft. The box wasn't just valuable. It was dangerous. Something inside it could bring death, or at the very least, ruin, to anyone who tried to take it by force. I could feel the heat pressing down from the desert sun, the dust clinging to my sweat-slicked skin, but all of that paled against the cold calculation running through my mind. If I didn't act now, she would be at the mercy of men who had already proven they didn't care about law, fairness, or life itself. I squared my shoulders, raising a hand to signal calm while keeping the other close to my sidearm. Whatever happened next would determine if we walked away, or if the desert swallowed us both, leaving only a whisper of dust and broken boards behind. The woman's fingers tightened around the box, her knuckles white, and I knew that she was ready to fight too, if necessary. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting something that could change everything. The first shot rang out like thunder across the sun-baked platform. I barely had time to react, diving behind the water trough with the woman close at my side. The wooden boards of the platform splintered where bullets struck, sending jagged shards into the dust. Her box slipped slightly in her grasp, and instinctively I reached out to steady it, pressing it against her as I whispered a warning she wouldn't understand in words but would feel in tone. The sheriff and his deputies were moving with precision now, guns raised, each step measured, like predators circling prey. The desert wind carried the sharp scent of gunpowder, stinging my eyes as I assessed our position. Every instinct screamed at me, move, act, protect. The woman crouched lower, her movements fluid despite the gash along her ribs that we both knew was bleeding more than she admitted. She glanced at the scattered dust, calculating trajectories, escape routes, and timing. It was clear she'd faced danger before, real danger, and that instinct hadn't left her, not for a second. I took a deep breath and glanced toward the approaching stagecoach in the distance, the driver urging the horses faster with a whip that cracked like lightning. The new arrivals would either be salvation or complicate the chaos further. The sheriff's voice cut across the station, calm but filled with menace, ordering her to surrender the box. But the weight of her grip told me she wouldn't yield, and in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about gold or property. It was about trust, loyalty, and survival. I shifted slightly, trying to provide her cover while keeping my own hands near my weapon. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity as bullets kicked up dust around us. The woman's eyes flicked to me, and for a split second, I saw something like resolve mirrored in my own reflection. Whoever thought this would be easy hadn't met her. Whoever thought I'd back down hadn't met me. The battle for that wooden box, and for our lives, had only just begun, and the desert seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. The roar of hooves filled the air, louder than the gunfire, as a second stagecoach appeared on the horizon, kicking up clouds of dust that blurred the edges of reality. My heart leapt. Whoever these riders were, they weren't drifters. They moved with coordination, precision, and purpose. The woman's eyes widened the instant she recognized them, a flash of relief mingled with urgency crossing her features. She shifted closer to me, pressing the box against her chest as if I were a shield, her gaze never leaving the approaching figures. The stagecoach slammed to a halt at the edge of the platform, the driver whipping the horses to a stop with terrifying skill. Men in dark clothing spilled out, rifles trained, movements deliberate. It was clear immediately, they weren't ordinary travelers. The sheriff and his deputies hesitated, glancing at each other, realization dawning that the odds had shifted. The woman's brothers, or guardians, or whatever they were, had arrived, and they had the upper hand. I felt a strange mixture of relief and tension. Relief that the woman would not face this danger alone, and tension because I still didn't know the full weight of what was inside that box. The sheriff, realizing his advantage slipping away, barked orders, but his voice lacked authority now. The deputies fumbled with their guns, eyes darting toward the newcomers with a new kind of fear. The woman caught my gaze, and in that instant, no words were needed. She was ready, willing, and capable. The gold, the letters, the wooden box, they were all part of a plan I was just beginning to understand. Dust swirled around the platform as rifles were raised and aimed. I crouched behind the trough, the woman at my side, heart pounding. This standoff was far from over, but now the tides had changed. Whoever thought this would be a simple robbery or misunderstanding was about to learn that the woman I had thought was lost was anything but helpless. She was the center of a storm that had only just begun to rage, and now, with her reinforcements here, we were no longer fighting from desperation. We were fighting from strength. Amid the dust and chaos, the woman finally shifted the box slightly so I could catch a glimpse. My eyes widened as I saw the contents, not loose gold tossed carelessly, but rows of coins meticulously wrapped in silk, each marked with delicate characters, carefully labeled. This wasn't stolen wealth. This was her dowry, her life savings, something she had carried across the continent with precision and care. Every movement she had made, the vigilance, the injuries, the determination, was tied to the protection of that box. I realized then the depth of what we were facing. The sheriff and his deputies had no idea what they were chasing, and yet they were willing to risk life and law to claim it. She wasn't just a woman in the wrong place. She was a guardian of something that carried meaning far beyond the monetary value. Her eyes met mine for a fleeting second, and I saw the burden she carried. Years of planning, fear of betrayal, and the weight of a journey that had brought her here, alone, into danger she hadn't asked for but had prepared to survive. The riders from the second stagecoach spread out, forming a defensive line with rifles ready, their movements fluid, professional. I understood immediately. They weren't mercenaries. They were her family, trained to act in silence and speed, and the sheriff's confidence faltered under their presence. Bullets still kicked up dust, but now the balance had shifted. We weren't just reacting. We were defending something sacred. I could see the urgency in her dark eyes as she whispered in her own language, a rapid prayer or command I didn't understand, but the meaning was clear. Protect, preserve, survive. I nodded, my resolve hardening. Whoever thought this woman was helpless hadn't known what it meant to fight for something worth protecting. The sheriff's arrogance, the deputy's overconfidence, it all crumbled under the weight of truth. The box wasn't treasure to steal. It was a lifeline, a symbol of survival, and we were going to ensure it reached its rightful destination, no matter the cost. The platform erupted into chaos. The sheriff drew his gun, stepping forward with a confidence that vanished the moment he saw the organized precision of her reinforcements. Bullets tore through the dry air, splintering wood and sending clouds of dust into our faces. I ducked low behind the trough, the woman pressing close, the box held tight against her chest. Every movement she made was deliberate, controlled. Like a dance we were both improvising in response to death. Samuel's rifle cracked from the store window, forcing one of the deputies to stumble back with a howl. The sheriff shouted, attempting to regain control, but the tide had turned. Her escorts moved with lethal accuracy, corralling the lawmen like predators isolating prey. I could see the sheriff faltering, his authority crumbling as he realized this wasn't a fight he could win. The woman's eyes caught mine for a fleeting second. She made a swift motion, tilting the box slightly and revealing the coins wrapped in silk. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just her dowry. These coins represented trust, years of survival, a legacy she refused to surrender to greed or corruption. Her whispered words, rapid in her native language, were a call to action. Preserve life, defend what matters, and never yield. A bullet ricocheted off the trough, just inches from my shoulder. Reflexively, I grabbed her arm, pulling her down and shielding her. The sheriff's deputies scrambled, realizing too late they were outmatched, outnumbered and outwitted. I could see the desperation in their eyes. The woman, still clutching the box, moved with agility despite her wound, gathering what had scattered and retreating behind cover. By the time the dust settled and the last shot rang out, the sheriff lay injured, his deputies subdued, and the woman's box remained intact. She straightened slowly, her dark eyes scanning the station, and for the first time, I saw relief mingled with exhaustion. She had survived. We had survived. And in that survival, something unspoken had been forged between us. Trust, courage, and an understanding that went beyond letters, names, or expectations. As the dust settled, the silence of the desert pressed down like a heavy blanket. The sheriff groaned where he lay, his deputies bound and subdued, and the platform finally felt like our own again. I helped the woman steady herself, her dark eyes meeting mine with a quiet intensity one couldn't ignore. She shifted the wooden box slightly, revealing again the neat rows of gold coins wrapped in silk, marked with the careful handwriting of a lifetime. But now I understood the full truth. This wasn't just a dowry. These coins were part of a ledger, records, evidence of years of labor, promises broken, and wages withheld from the Chinese workers who had built the railroads. She had traveled thousands of miles, risking life and limb, to ensure justice reached hands that had been denied it for too long. I realized then what courage really meant. Not the absence of fear, but the resolve to act when fear could have easily paralyzed you. She had faced more danger than I could imagine, survived attacks, gunfire, and corruption, and yet she moved with calm precision, her mission clear. I glanced at her brother and his men, and the weight of responsibility lifted slightly. She was not alone. I was just a part of this, a protector for a moment in her long journey. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the platform. The woman straightened fully, brushing dust from her dark clothes. She looked at me, her eyes reflecting intelligence, strength, and something else I couldn't name. "Thank you," she said in careful English, her voice carrying the fatigue of miles traveled and battles fought. I nodded, understanding that the moment we had shared, chaotic, dangerous, and entirely unexpected, had changed both of us. As her escort prepared to continue toward Denver, I held the wooden box for her, knowing it carried more than wealth. It carried trust, hope, and the power to rewrite the stories of countless lives. The woman gave me a small, genuine smile, and for a fleeting instant, the loneliness that had driven me to wait for a stranger vanished completely. Sometimes, the wrong delivery brings the right destiny. And now, as I watched her ride away into the horizon, I realized that courage, loyalty, and the determination to do what is right can turn even the most impossible situations into something unforgettable. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more unforgettable Wild West tales, where danger, destiny, and courage collide in ways you never expected.